The first time I met the children, they were digging through a trash container behind the refugee shelter. Not stealing, not fighting, just looking for something to eat. The smallest girl couldn't have been older than 6. When she found half a piece of stale bread, her face lit up like she'd discovered treasure. That sight hit me harder than any weapon ever could. So I bought them lunch. I thought it would be a one-time thing. It wasn't. The next day they were back. And the day after that. Soon it became a routine. Every afternoon after work I brought food. The children would run toward me with excited smiles. Their mother never did. She always stayed a few steps behind them. Watching, silent, careful, almost as if she didn't trust kindness. At first I thought she was proud. Then I thought she was afraid. The truth was far bigger than either. Months passed. I learned the children's favorite foods. I learned their names. I learned that the youngest always tried to sneak extra dessert. What I never learned was who they really were. Because nobody told me. Not the shelter workers. Not the government. Not even the woman herself. To me, she was simply a struggling mother trying to protect her children. If I had known the truth, I probably would have laughed. Because while I was making sandwiches for her kids, entire star systems were searching for them. While I was teaching them card games, fleets of warships were crossing the galaxy. While I worried about paying rent, kings, admirals, and planetary rulers were waiting for a single message from their missing queen. I knew none of that. Everything changed on a rainy afternoon. The children were eating lunch. Their mother was sitting nearby. And I was telling a terrible joke that made the youngest laugh so hard she nearly fell off her chair. Then the sky disappeared. A shadow covered the entire city. People stopped walking. Cars stopped moving. Every eye turned upward. And what we saw made the world go silent. Thousands of warships. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Thousands. The largest fleet ever assembled hung above the planet like a second sky. Moments later, soldiers flooded the streets. The shelter was surrounded. The children suddenly looked frightened. Their mother stood up, and for the first time since I had met her, she didn't look like a refugee. She looked like a ruler. Then one of the soldiers dropped to one knee and shouted words that turned my entire life upside down. "Your Majesty, we finally found you." The woman whose children I had been feeding every day was the queen of the galaxy. For several seconds, nobody moved. Not the soldiers. Not the shelter workers. Not even the children. The entire street stood frozen as thousands of armed troops knelt before the quiet woman I had known for months. "Your Majesty, we finally found you." The words echoed in my head. Your Majesty. Queen. Galaxy. None of it made sense. I looked at the woman. Then at the children. Then back at the soldiers. Surely there had been some kind of mistake. The youngest girl tugged on my sleeve. "Mr. Noah?" Her voice sounded small. Scared, I knelt beside her. "It's okay." The truth was that I had absolutely no idea if it was okay. The little girl grabbed my hand tightly. That was when I noticed something strange. None of the children seemed surprised. Nervous? Yes, afraid? Definitely, but shocked? No, as if they had always known. Because of course they had. The woman finally stepped forward. The crowd immediately parted for her, not because they were told to, because they wanted to. Power radiated from her in a way I had never seen before. The tired refugee mother was gone. Standing before us was someone else entirely. Someone born to command. A silver-armored officer approached and bowed deeply. "The fleet is prepared, Your Majesty." She nodded. "How many systems have fallen?" The officer hesitated. 7. A shadow crossed her face. For the first time I realized this wasn't simply a reunion. Something terrible was happening. The queen turned toward her children. Immediately her expression softened. The ruler vanished. The mother returned. She knelt and embraced them. For several moments, she said nothing, just held them close. The sight felt strangely familiar, because despite everything I had learned today, she still looked like the same woman who watched her children eat lunch every afternoon. Eventually, the youngest daughter pointed at me. "Can Noah come too?" The entire street became silent. Again, thousands of soldiers looked toward me. Several officers exchanged confused glances. The Queen looked at me for a long moment. Then, something unexpected happened. She smiled. A genuine smile. The same one I had occasionally seen during the past few months. "That depends." The little girl tilted her head. "On what?" The Queen's eyes met mine. "On whether Noah wishes to come." I blinked. "Come where?" Before I could ask, dozens of enormous ships began descending through the clouds. The ground trembled. People stared in awe. One vessel was larger than the refugee district itself. Its golden hull reflected the sunlight like a moving city. I suddenly understood something. This woman wasn't merely important. She wasn't simply a queen. She ruled an empire so vast that my mind struggled to comprehend it. And somehow, I had spent months making sandwiches for her children. The youngest daughter squeezed my hand. "Please come." I opened my mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. No words came out. Because honestly, what exactly was a person supposed to say after discovering that the children he'd been feeding belonged to the most powerful woman in the galaxy? Fortunately, the Queen rescued me. "You do not owe us anything." Her voice was calm, gentle. "If you wish to remain here, no one will object." I stared at her, then at the children. The oldest boy looked worried. The youngest girl looked hopeful. For the first time all day, I realized something. Despite the fleets, despite the soldiers, despite the titles, they were still the same family, and those children were still my friends. I sighed. "Do they still get lunch if I come?" The youngest immediately cheered. Several soldiers looked horrified. One admiral nearly stopped breathing. The Queen simply laughed. The sound was warm and genuine, and for reasons I couldn't explain, it made the entire situation feel a little less impossible. "Yes," she said, "they still get lunch." I pointed at the youngest girl. "Then I guess somebody has to stop her from stealing extra dessert." The child gasped dramatically. "I do not steal." "You absolutely steal. I strategically relocate dessert." The Queen laughed harder. Several admirals looked as though reality itself had broken, because they had never seen their ruler act this way. Meanwhile, I was discovering a terrifying truth. The most powerful woman in the galaxy was a lot more dangerous when she smiled. A few minutes later, standing beneath a warship larger than a city, I followed the royal family aboard. As the massive doors closed behind us, I took one final look at the planet below. I had no idea where we were going. I had no idea what awaited me. But deep down, I knew one thing. The strangest chapter of my life had just begun. The moment the warship left the planet, I realized something. I was completely out of my depth. The vessel was larger than some cities I'd visited. Golden corridors stretched in every direction. Soldiers stood guard at every intersection. Servants moved with perfect discipline. And everywhere I looked, people bowed the instant the Queen appeared. Not out of fear, out of respect. The kind of respect that had been earned over decades, maybe centuries. Yet despite all that, the children behaved exactly the same. The youngest girl was currently running through one of the royal corridors while two exhausted guards chased after her. "I don't need an escort. Your Highness, please slow down. You are too slow." The guards looked ready to resign. I couldn't blame them. A laugh escaped me. The little princess pointed triumphantly. "See? Noah thinks it's funny." One guard looked at me as though this were somehow my fault. Honestly, it probably was. The Queen appeared beside me. For a moment we simply watched the chaos unfold. Then her expression softened. "They like you." I smiled. "I like them too." The answer seemed to surprise her, not because of what I said, because of how naturally I said it. As though I didn't care they were royalty, which honestly, I didn't. Children were children, whether they lived in a palace or a refugee shelter. For several seconds she remained silent. Then she spoke quietly. "Do you know why I hid my identity?" I shook my head. "No." A shadow crossed her face. "Because I no longer knew who I could trust." That got my attention immediately. She led me toward a private observation deck overlooking the stars. No guards, no servants, just the two of us. For the first time since boarding the ship, she looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying a burden far too heavy to share. "My husband died 6 years ago." I didn't interrupt. The day he died, every powerful family in the galaxy suddenly became interested in helping me. A bitter smile appeared, but they weren't interested in helping. They were interested in power. I understood. The moment the throne became vulnerable, ambitious people saw opportunity. Some wanted influence. Some wanted control. Some wanted my children. Her voice hardened. Others wanted the throne itself. I looked at her, not as a queen, as a mother. And suddenly everything made sense. The hiding, the secrecy, the refugee shelter, the months spent living among ordinary people. She hadn't disappeared because she was afraid for herself. She had disappeared because she was protecting her children. "You wanted to know who you could trust." Her eyes met mine. Yes, the answer came instantly, as if she'd been waiting for someone to understand. For several moments, neither of us spoke. The stars drifted silently outside the observation window. Then, she asked something unexpected. "Why did you help them?" I blinked. "What? The children?" Her voice remained calm. "You didn't know who they were. You gained nothing. You expected nothing. Yet every day you returned." The question caught me off guard, because I'd never really thought about it. Finally, I shrugged. They were hungry. The queen stared at me. I continued. They needed help. So I helped. Her eyes never left mine, almost as if she were searching for something, trying to determine whether my answer was genuine. Eventually, she looked away. A small smile touched her lips. "You really are different." Before I could respond, alarms suddenly echoed through the ship. Red warning lights flashed overhead. The queen's expression changed instantly. The mother disappeared. The ruler returned. A military officer rushed into the room. His face was pale. "Your Majesty." "What happened?" The officer swallowed hard. "One of the royal sectors has declared independence." The room went silent. I didn't fully understand galactic politics, but judging by the officer's expression, this was bad. Very bad. The queen remained calm. "What else?" The officer hesitated, then delivered the second piece of news. "The rebel fleet has formed an alliance." My stomach tightened. An alliance with who? The officer looked toward the stars, his face growing even paler. The Iron Dominion. Even I recognized that name. Everyone did. The Iron Dominion was the largest military power in known space. Their fleets had conquered entire civilizations. Their admirals were legendary. And now they were supporting a rebellion against the Queen. Wonderful. Just wonderful. The officer activated a holographic display. Thousands of enemy ships appeared above dozens of star systems. The scale was unbelievable. This wasn't a political dispute. This was the beginning of a war. A war that could consume the galaxy. For the first time since meeting her, I saw genuine worry in the Queen's eyes. Not fear. Concern, the kind a leader feels when millions of lives depend on their decisions. The officer lowered his voice. "The council requests your immediate presence." The Queen nodded. "Prepare the command chamber." "At once." The officer left. Silence followed. I looked at the massive holographic battlefield floating before us. Then at the Queen. Then back at the stars. A few days ago, my biggest concern had been paying rent. Now I was standing beside the most powerful woman in the galaxy, while an interstellar war threatened to erupt. Life was strange. The Queen suddenly smiled. A tired smile, but genuine. "I suppose this is not how you expected your week to go." I laughed. Not even close. For a brief moment, she laughed too. Then the moment passed. The ruler returned. The queen turned toward the command chamber, toward the war waiting for her. But before leaving, she paused and looked back at me. "Stay close, Noah." Something in her voice felt different, more personal, more trusting. Then she disappeared through the doorway, leaving me alone with a terrifying realization. The galaxy wasn't just searching for its queen anymore. The galaxy was about to go to war. And somehow, I was right in the middle of it. The war began 3 days later, not with a declaration, not with a warning, but with fire. Entire star systems disappeared from the royal network within hours. Communication relays were destroyed. Trade routes collapsed. Military outposts vanished. Every report that reached the flagship seemed worse than the last. And everywhere I looked, people were afraid. Not because they doubted the queen. Because they understood the size of the enemy. The Iron Dominion commanded the largest military force in known space. Their fleets numbered in the thousands. Their admirals had never lost a major campaign. Worst of all, they weren't fighting alone. Half the rebel sectors had joined them. The galaxy wasn't facing a rebellion anymore. It was facing a civil war. I spent most of those days trying to stay out of the way, which turned out to be impossible. The children kept finding me. The youngest princess especially. She somehow appeared wherever I happened to be. Command deck. Training rooms. Dining halls. It was honestly impressive. One afternoon, she climbed into a chair beside me while I studied a tactical display. "What are you doing?" Trying to understand why everyone looks worried. She looked at the hologram. Thousands of enemy ships glowed red. Our fleets glowed blue. Even I could tell the situation wasn't good. The little princess pointed. "Why don't they go around?" I blinked. Around what? The enemy. I stared at her, then at the map, then back at her. Something clicked. Suddenly, violently, I leaned forward. The enemy fleet was blocking the shortest route between several key systems. Every military planner assumed the royal fleet would attack directly. Why? Because that was the fastest route. The obvious route. The expected route. I looked again. A longer route existed. Dangerous, complicated, but possible. No one had considered it because it required passing through an unstable nebula. Most ships avoided it. Most, not all. My heart began racing. No way. The princess tilted her head. "What?" I stood so fast the chair nearly fell over. "I need to speak to your mother." Immediately, 10 minutes later, I found myself standing inside the royal command chamber. Hundreds of officers filled the room. Massive holographic battle maps floated above the floor. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone looked exhausted. The queen stood at the center, listening to another grim report. When she saw me enter, surprise crossed her face. "Noah?" Several admirals looked annoyed. One of them looked offended. Apparently, maintenance workers interrupting military briefings wasn't common practice. Shocking, I think I found something. The room became quiet. The senior admiral folded his arms. Found what exactly? I pointed toward the map. A path. The officers exchanged looks, some amused, some skeptical. The admiral sighed. "Young man, we've spent weeks analyzing through the Ashara Nebula." The room froze. Every conversation stopped. Every officer stared at the display. The admiral's expression changed instantly. Because he understood. The queen understood too. The Ashara Nebula. A region so dangerous that most navigators avoided it entirely. Electrical storms, gravitational distortions, sensor interference. A nightmare. But also the last place the enemy expected a fleet to appear. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the queen stepped closer. "Show me." I did. The more we analyzed the route, the more impossible it became to ignore. Risky? Absolutely, but if it worked, the royal fleet could appear behind enemy lines. Cut supply routes. Break the blockade. Maybe even end the war. Hope spread across the room for the first time in days. Not certainty. Hope, and sometimes that was enough. 24 hours later, the fleet entered the nebula. It was terrifying. Storms the size of planets flashed around us. Lightning danced between stars. Ships disappeared into glowing clouds and reappeared minutes later. Every second felt dangerous. But we kept moving. Forward, deeper, toward enemy territory. Then the impossible happened. The plan worked. When the fleet emerged from the nebula, we appeared directly behind the Dominion blockade. The enemy never saw us coming. Panic spread through their formations. Supply vessels were destroyed. Communication networks collapsed. Entire battle groups became isolated. For the first time since the war began, the Dominion was losing. Celebrations erupted throughout the flagship. Officers laughed. Soldiers cheered. Even the Queen smiled. Then everything went wrong. An emergency alarm echoed through the command deck. Warning, enemy strike group detected. The celebrations stopped instantly. A hidden enemy fleet had survived. And it was heading directly toward us. Toward the flagship. Toward the Queen. The enemy commander had realized something important. Destroy the Queen. Win the war. Hundreds of hostile ships accelerated toward our position. Weapons charging. Engines blazing. The flagship shook as explosions erupted nearby. Officers rushed to battle stations. The command chamber descended into chaos. I looked at the tactical display, then at the Queen, then back at the display, and suddenly I saw it. A weakness. A tiny one. But real. The enemy formation was concentrating entirely on the flagship, ignoring something else. A nearby stellar energy field. Unstable, volatile, dangerous, an idea formed. The kind of idea that usually gets people killed. Unfortunately, those were often the most effective ideas. I ran to the navigation station. "What are you doing?" shouted an officer. Trying not to die. Fairly reasonable, I thought. The Queen looked at me, trusting me. That somehow made everything more terrifying. I adjusted several coordinates, calculated an interception path, and sent the command. The flagship accelerated, straight toward the energy field. Several officers looked horrified. One actually shouted. The enemy fleet followed, exactly as planned. Closer, closer, closer. Then the Queen understood. A smile appeared, the first one I'd seen during the war. Execute it. The navigation officer obeyed. Moments later, the flagship veered away at the last possible second. The Dominion fleet couldn't. The unstable stellar field erupted. A chain reaction exploded across enemy formations. Ships scattered. Systems failed. Entire squadrons vanished from the battlefield. The attack collapsed. The flagship survived. And the Queen was safe. Silence filled the command deck. Then everyone looked at me. Again, I was starting to notice a pattern. The senior admiral slowly removed his cap, shook his head, and laughed. Actually laughed. I cannot believe a refugee shelter volunteer just saved the royal fleet. Around the room, officers began applauding, then cheering, then celebrating. The Queen approached quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. Not as a ruler, not as a queen, as a woman, as a mother, as someone who trusted me completely. And that was when I realized something dangerous. The war wasn't the only thing changing. Neither of us were pretending anymore. And judging by the way she was looking at me, the biggest battle ahead might not be fought among the stars. It might be fought inside our hearts. The victory should have felt like the end. Instead, it felt like the beginning. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. Every major network carried the same story. A human civilian had helped save the royal fleet. Military analysts called it impossible. Politicians called it miraculous. The public called it inspiring. I called it embarrassing. Mostly because people kept applauding whenever I entered a room. The children found this hilarious. The youngest princess especially. She spent an entire afternoon introducing me to people as, "This is Noah. He saves fleets and makes sandwiches." Somehow, That became my official reputation. The war, however, was not over. The Iron Dominion had lost a major battle, but they remained dangerous. One final confrontation was coming. Everyone knew it, including the enemy. 3 weeks later, the royal fleet arrived above the Dominion capital. Thousands of ships filled the darkness, the largest gathering of military power in galactic history. The final battle lasted 6 hours. 6 brutal hours of fire, sacrifice, and determination. But when it ended, the result was undeniable. The Dominion surrendered. The rebellion collapsed. The war was over. Across hundreds of worlds, people celebrated. Cities filled with lights. Ships sounded their horns. Families reunited. For the first time in years, the galaxy knew peace. Yet while everyone else celebrated, I found myself standing alone in the Royal Observation Garden. The same place I always went when I needed to think. Stars drifted beyond the glass. Silent, beautiful, endless footsteps approached behind me. I already knew who it was. The Queen. She stepped beside me and looked out at the stars. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence felt comfortable, familiar. Finally, she broke it. The war is over. Looks that way. You helped save millions of lives. I smiled slightly. A lot of people did. Yes, her voice softened. But I'm talking about you. For a moment, neither of us looked at each other. Perhaps because we already knew where this conversation was heading. The Queen took a slow breath. Then another, as if preparing herself. That caught my attention immediately, because I had seen her face admirals. I had seen her face assassins. I had seen her face war. None of those things made her nervous. This conversation did. Noah, there was something different in her voice. Something personal. Something vulnerable. I turned toward her. For a few seconds, she simply looked at me. Not as a hero, not as a strategist, not as the human who helped win a war. Just Noah. The man who had fed her children when nobody was watching. The man who had treated a queen like an ordinary person. The man who had become part of her family's life without even realizing it. Then she finally spoke. Do you know why I never told you who I was? I shook my head. I wanted to. Her eyes shimmered, but every time I tried, I was afraid. Afraid? A faint smile appeared. That you would start treating me differently. The answer hit harder than I expected. Because I understood. Everyone treated queens differently. Everyone saw the crown first, the person second. But somehow, without knowing it, I had done the opposite. I had seen the person. And that mattered to her more than I ever realized. She stepped closer. Just one step. But it felt important. When my children were hungry, you helped them. When we were alone, you spoke honestly. When everyone else saw a throne, you saw a mother. Her voice became quieter. And somewhere along the way, she smiled. I fell in love with you. The universe seemed to stop. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly. Like everything else had suddenly become less important. For a moment I couldn't speak. Not because I was shocked. Because I'd been feeling the same thing for a long time. I just hadn't known how to say it. The Queen looked away briefly, perhaps worried about my silence, perhaps worried she had made a mistake. So I did the only thing that felt right. I reached for her hand. She looked back immediately. Hope flickered in her eyes. I think, I said softly, I fell in love with you somewhere between the sandwiches and the warships. For 1 second she stared. Then she laughed. A real laugh. Bright, warm, beautiful, the kind of laugh that made every difficult moment worthwhile. And for the first time since I'd met her, the Queen forgot to be a queen. She was simply a woman who was happy. A throat cleared behind us. We both froze. Slowly turning around. The children stood near the doorway, every single one of them. Watching, the youngest princess grinned. We knew it. The older prince nodded. Took you long enough. I buried my face in my hands. The queen looked equally embarrassed. The children, unfortunately, found this incredibly entertaining. A moment later, another figure entered. The Grand Marshal of the Royal Fleet, one of the most respected military leaders in the galaxy. He bowed, then smiled. "Your Majesty, the representatives are waiting." The Queen sighed. "Duty calls." The Marshal glanced at me, then, to my complete surprise, bowed again. This time to me. "The galaxy owes you a debt, Noah." Around the palace, others began doing the same. Soldiers, officials, advisors, one by one. Not because of my title. I didn't have one. Not because of my power. I had none. But because kindness had changed the course of history. A simple lunch. A simple act of compassion. That was where everything began. Months later, historians would write books about the war. They would analyze battles, study strategies, debate political decisions. Most of them would miss the most important lesson. The fate of the galaxy wasn't changed by fleets, or armies, or rulers. It was changed the day a hungry child found someone willing to share a meal. And as for me, I never became a king. I never wanted a throne. But I did gain something far better. A family. The children still demanded extra dessert. The queen still laughed at terrible jokes. And every now and then, when the palace became too crowded, we would sit together beneath the stars. Just a mother, a human, and the family that neither of us ever expected to find.